Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hancock of Emerald Planet TV, coming to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And we're looking for ways that we're going to be able to provide the food, the fuel, the fiber for humanity. It's going estimated from 7 to 9 billion people, yes, 7 to 9 billion people by 2050. And so we're looking at how we're going to be able to provide the food and the water at the same time we take care of all the other basic necessities. We have a person who is going to be coming on by Skype. Her name is Marcelian Cravat. She is the director-producer of what's called Angel Azul. This is a internationally renowned documentary film about coral reefs, oceans, and climate change. And sitting right beside me is Henri Polgar, and he is the executive director of what's called the PanAmerican, PanAfrican Association. And in case we lose Marcy by Skype, then Henry's going to be here to work with us. Marcy, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Well, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me, Sam.
We're so glad to have you, and thank you for producing this incredibly wonderful documentary about combining all these various issues. So tell us a little bit about this Angel Azul. What is it? And we can see the poster right behind your head. So thank you for putting it there.
Well, Angel Azul is a film that explores issues that are related to the coral reefs, which are currently disappearing at unprecedented rates around the world. And we've used an artist, an eco-sculptor who's from England, and he creates artificial coral reefs from statues that he's cast from live human models. And he installs these on the ocean floor in an underwater museum off the coast of Cancun in the Yucatan, Mexico. And over time, the statues are intended to grow coral and attract tourists away from the natural reefs that are really taking a hit down there. They have a lot of tourism in Cancun, and they were looking for a way to divert the tourists away. So the film explores the issues that are related to the coral reefs down there, but it also focuses on the bigger issues that are facing all of the coral reefs all around the world. I
think it's just fantastic. If we can bring up the first slide here, this will give us an idea where this is the Akumal Ecological Center there in the Yucatan Peninsula, and it's an absolutely gorgeous place where you had a chance to do this. But why did you, what was the motivation for actually producing such a documentary where you're spending as much time underwater as you are on land?
Well, to be quite honest, the whole thing was a surprise. I have a daughter who called me late one afternoon, and she was very excited about a website she'd just been on, and she asked me to take a look because she thought that I might be interested in this as a subject for a future documentary. So straight away I went onto the website and I saw these compelling statues. I was drawn in immediately by the fantasy of humans being underwater, and also by the intrigue of the coral growing on the statues. And at the time, I didn't know a lot about coral reefs, and I didn't understand how endangered they really were. So I called Jason DeCaries Taylor, the artist, right there within 15 minutes after viewing them online. And I asked Jason if he would be interested in doing a documentary because I was really, really interested in this. So we decided we were going to do it just practically right then and there. And I found myself flying down to Mexico just a few weeks later. And the documentary just began. And I had no idea when I started this documentary that it was going to extend out to become the full-fledged environmental documentary that it became.
I tell you, it's just incredible when you see these statues, and we're going to have more of the images here just in a few minutes. But what is your process as far as developing the script for this? because this is a very interesting documentary. You're talking about nature, ecology, wildlife, a natural preserve, but at the same time you're talking about real people and real communities, because this is a living place where all these people live around the coral, and at the same time they're in real communities that are having negative impact from the demise of many of the coral. So how do you descript something that's that complex?
Well, to be honest with you, we did not script it. We just started shooting, and it was just a crew of two, just myself and John Bennett, who was the sound guy. And we traveled down to start following the making of a statue, which was going to be the angel. And we really didn't know what was going to happen and what was going to unfold. So what we did, the process was basically, we kept our eyes open and we kept our ears open, and we listened for the story to come to us. Because there was a lot of panic about that. When you're investing your time and your finances and your energy in making a film like this, you want to know that there's going to be a full story there. And we really weren't sure where we were going. About midway through, the statues started growing these big blooms of algae. And we were very curious as to why. And as it turns out, we learned that the wastewater problem down there in the area, which is not at all unique to Mexico, this happens worldwide, this was causing nutrients to get straight into the water and cause these prolific algae blooms on the statues, which was suffocating the coral, killing it. So this was also very concerning to Jason, the artist, and this took the whole story in a new direction. And we were then compelled to bring scientists into the whole story, because we needed to have experts explain to us what was happening and what solutions were available to us to try and fix this problem. So that's how the story unfolded, and that's how I scripted it. When it was finally edited, I finally finished the rough cut. I knew that I was going to have to write the narration, because we had Peter Coyote scheduled to do the narration. So I was very inspired by Werner Herzog's script from Grizzly Man. So I pulled that script up and I had that on the computer while I wrote the narration, because it really gave me permission as a filmmaker to have a voice. And I did not want to fall into a sort of formulaic documentary where I was just giving facts like a journalist. I wanted to have a voice, and I really had a message I was trying to deliver, and it was really following the lead of Jason's message and from the statues he made.
Well, that's a perfect segue. Is what do you think really is the most important message or messages from Angel Azul?
Well, the message, the basic message of the film, I learned myself after the film was edited, and it finally jumped out at me. I was trying to fuse together the art and the science, which was difficult to do, because in a lot of ways it felt like two separate stories, but it really wasn't, because Jason's statues were all about motivating awareness. And all of the issues that are plaguing the coral reefs are the same issues that he brings up in the messages in his statues. So they did go together very nicely, but I didn't realize until I was pretty close to finished with the edit that the message of the film is that everything connects. And it was Sylvia Earle's words that jumped out at me. She had said that. And we were trying to put title cards in to connect the chapters of the film. And I chose those words that she said, everything connects. And I realized this isn't really a story about the coral reefs. This isn't really a story about art. This is a story, we've lured people in with art and used the coral reefs as one of the ecosystems in trouble to deliver the message. But the real message is that everything connects. And everything we do in our lives, the choices we make, will determine what we leave for future generations.
Well, Sylvia Earle is one of the most worldwide famous marine biologists, a undersea diver, a photographer. I mean, she is just really a Renaissance woman, starting in the 20th century, now carrying over in the 21st century. and she's explorer in residence at the National Geographic. I just wanted to explain to our audiences who Sylvia Earle was, who's just, it's a good friend to many of us and doing good work. But we've had Henri sitting here very patiently, Marcy, as you know, and he's here in case we lose you by Skype. We haven't, so he's going to actually ask the next question. Henri?
Oh, hello, Marcy. This is Henri Polgar. How are you?
I'm fine, Henri.
Good. And I saw the film. It's a very beautiful film. And I think our listeners would love to hear you speak something about the metaphors in the Angel Azul film. If you could describe some of the metaphors in terms of the sculptural pieces.
Right. Well, Jason uses metaphor repeatedly. I think there's a crossover between metaphor and symbolism, but he uses it repeatedly in his statues. And I also use it as a filmmaker. So it went together very nicely. A lot of his statues are, like, for example, the listener statue is a statue covered in ears. And within the statue, there's a hydrophone that listens to the sounds of the reef. And metaphorically speaking, it's asking the question, are we listening? And I piggybacked onto that to further explain it that we as a species have a responsibility on this planet. We do not have dominion over the animals, and I really believe that. And in fact, in the film myself, I tried to use animals as a metaphor for that. They have a personality in the film. They watch what's going on almost like they're surveying. They have a responsibility. And I put that in there to piggyback onto Jason's messages. Throughout the film, there are metaphors. There's a whole explanation of the karst ecosystem, which is very, very specific to that area of Mexico. It's actually quite fascinating because the whole peninsula is made from limestone, which collapses. And when it collapses, it makes these sinkholes. And the sinkholes, if you go visit them, will lead you right down into what they call a cenote, which is a sinkhole. And they're the most pristine, beautiful things. One of the most beautiful things I've seen. Just absolutely stunning.
Marcy, we're going to lose you in just about 15 seconds, and I want to bring in this one question. What's this intersect of art and science that you're bringing out in your films?
Well, I think that people...
Got to be quick. We got 15 seconds.
Okay. Well, I'm actually very motivated by messages that are delivered by art, literature, music, and comedy. I think that really touches a chord in people. Sounds like
You're running out of time. Anyway, Marcy, thank you for being with us, and thank you, dear viewers, as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing. No. 127 consecutive.
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States, looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we go from 7 to 9 billion people on the planet, we're going to need to figure out how to actually bring about feeding and providing the food, the fuel, the fiber for all these new souls that we're going to have on the planet. We have a gentleman that's going to be coming in by Skype from Boston. He's a professor at Harvard University, but also he is the president of the Global Coral Reef Alliance, and also president of Biorock International. And that's how we met Tom, a number of years ago. And so this is Dr. Thomas J. Goreau. And sitting right beside me is Henri Polgar, who is going to be here in case we lose Tom by Skype. So Tom, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you and see you. And thank you for joining us. I know you're in the middle of a big international seminar, and we really appreciate you being on with us. But tell us a little bit about the Global Coral Reef Alliance and then also the Biorock International. Let's see, did we lose Tom? Tom, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, but I don't have a good connection. I'm not sure.
Well, you're coming through loud and clear. Just keep.
I am. Okay. Well, I don't see you. You're moving, but okay, good. As long as you can hear me. Okay. Well, a couple things. I'm president of the Global Coral Reef Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on basic science on corals, trying to understand the fundamental factors that affect their distribution and their survival. So done a lot of fundamental work.
Yeah, we're really, the Skype seems to be freezing up on that spot. We'll see if we can bring him in. Let's bring up the first slide, and let's bring up the first slide, please. The first slide, there we go. We've been working with Tom Goreau, and actually Henri Polgar is sitting right beside me through the extension of Eric Hagberg of the PAC International has been working out in the South Pacific for many, many years. And so this is really a very simple but revolutionary technology that has actually been developed through the Biorock International. It is a patented process developed by Thomas J. Goreau, who we are now looking to get back on Skype. But it's very simple, where you actually have steel rebar welded in the shape of the coral reef that actually is either damaged, dying, or has already expired, and then put a low amount of electrical current through that, and then the coral and the calcium out of the water actually fuses around the rebar and reestablishes the coral reef. And it's really a phenomenal process. Again, it's very simple. It's something actually you put together as far as the rebar is concerned on land, and then you work with people of the local areas where the coral reef is located, and you literally move it right out into the water. And one of the reasons for doing this is that as the coral dies and is no longer there to protect and even feed the native species in that area, the fish have a tendency to move on, or the larger predators like the sharks are then able to just decimate the smaller fish stock was within these areas, because they really don't have a place to live. And so what you see here is some of the growth, and then also the imprint where the actual rebar was in this area. And so what Dr. Goreau has been able to do over time is that to go into these areas where the coral reef has really just been decimated, and within a short period of time recreate that reef. And so the strength of the coral, the vitality of the coral is greatly increased, but also grows at a much faster rate. And so this will give you an idea of what some of this looks like after only a few years. And so the work that was being done in Goreau by Eric Hagberg over almost a 10-year period, you'd have the before and after photographs, Henri,
exactly, right,
of this. And you would see a water area with absolutely no life in it at all that you could see as far as the fish are concerned. And within 2 years, all those massive numbers of fish are moving right back into the area. Henri, go ahead.
Eric Hagberg, who's a young marine biologist, and he's one of our representatives in the Pacific Islands, and he
of the PanAmerican, PanAfrican Association.
PanAfrican Association, and he collaborated with Dr. Goreau, where they actually built a Biorock installation in the Marshall Islands, and so
let's bring up this next slide if we can while we're talking, Henri, so we can show the makeup as far as the Biorock is concerned. If we can bring that slide, go ahead, Henri, please.
So Eric Hagberg is that his specialty has to do with the sea cucumber, where he's building hatcheries to revive the sea cucumber in those regions. And I guess Dr. Goreau has been very helpful.
I'll move through these slides, Henri. Right. We'll get over to
training Eric Hagberg and learning more about Biorock, and he's Eric Hagberg has always spoken very highly of Dr. Goreau, of how grateful he is for all the help that he's given him out there. And Eric Hagberg, like you mentioned, that he's been living there on and off for 8 or 10 years, and it's just amazing for all of us to see him there, because he's a young fellow from the New Jersey shore, and but he has this love for the Pacific Islands, and that's where he lives.
Well, we're still trying to get Tom Goreau back on, so we'll go through some of these, but my understanding from Tom, and of course he'll be able to correct us when he comes back on, Henri, is that about 85% of the coral reefs around the world actually are in some state of disrepair to absolutely dead, where they called bleached coral, and so there's really nothing living as far as the coral within that area. So it's very important to reestablish this, to bring the fisheries, back into these societies. And I think we're going to get Tom on phone. Tom, are you with us by telephone?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm so sorry about the phones we had.
That's okay. That's okay. We can hear you loud and clear. We've been saying good things about you the whole time you've been away. So we've been carrying on. But what I was getting ready to go into, Tom, is the state the coral reefs around the world. Can you give us an update on what that status is?
Well, it's catastrophic almost everywhere. There's still a handful of places that have good coral. That's the good news, but they're the last ones. And we're seeing declines everywhere we go. And really, at the pace we're going, there's not a lot of time left in most places. In most places, we're looking at the last, handful of percent of corals of what used to be there 20, 30, 50 years ago. So it's very serious, and the thing is, what that done is that has wiped out the fisheries habitat that about 1 billion people rely on for their food, which are reef fish. This doesn't enter the commercial fish market. These are people who catch their own fish and trade it to their neighbors. And these people lost their habitat, and people, the response of the funding agencies and governments has been to try to regulate fishing, but as a matter of fact, if we don't restore the habitat, it doesn't matter how much we regulate fishing, the fish won't come back because there's no place for them to live. And that large-scale environmental restoration is at this point the challenge that faces us now, because conservation alone can't do the job anymore. There's just not enough left to save.
What you were saying, Tom, is that over 1 billion people have direct financial and personal connection with these reefs all over the globe, and of course we know that coral is in many areas of the world. So even because their livelihoods and also the ecology of their native areas is being destroyed by the loss of the coral, why is there not more of a direct connection between the coral, the ocean, and the humans that live in those areas, so that they actually go out and try to protect the coral and make sure that they're not destroyed?
Well, most people don't realize corals are living things. You know, the corals build the whole reef ecosystem the same way trees build a forest and create the habitat for all the birds and insects. Well, the corals do the same thing, but people think they're dead. They think they're stones. They don't think they're living things that need to be nurtured. And so their view is, they go ahead and destroy the environment to catch the fish. So destructive overfishing has been one big cause of reef destruction. Lots of other things too. I mean, in fact, reefs are affected by everything everybody does everywhere all the time. From our energy use to how we get our food to how we treat our waste. So it's a very complex situation. But the thing is that there are a lot of people who live directly from the food that reefs provide, or they make their living from the beaches that are behind reefs, from the tourism in tropical countries, or their coastlines are protected from by the reefs. So there are these ecological services the reefs provide that we don't pay for, so we don't appreciate them. They're free goods as far as we're concerned. When we lose the reef, and then we have to import fish because there are no fish to eat, and we have to build seawalls because the beaches are washed away, and at that point, when the tourists go away and there are no jobs, that's when we'll recognize the value of what we've lost. But until then, it just seems to be slowly going away, and no one's really worrying about it.
Tom, we're running out of time, and sorry we didn't have time to have more in depth. But tell us about Biorock and the importance of it. I described it. I had your slides to share with our audiences, but let's hear it in your own words. Biorock, and you have less than a minute, so you got to be quick.
Thanks so much. It's a revolutionary method to greatly increase the growth and health of living organisms. We build structures out of limestone of any size or shape. We make everything grow faster and healthier, and everything from corals to fish to oysters and so forth, so we can restore all kinds of marine habitats. Using trickle charges of electricity we can provide from the sun or wind or waves or ocean currents. So it's really quite remarkable. So we can bring these habitats back, and that's what we need to do.
All right, about 10 seconds. Angel Azul, why is it important, and how is it educating people about coral reefs and the oceans around the planet?
Well, it's a great movie that touches on underwater art, on tourism, on corals, on dolphins, and on what we do with our waste. So it ties together a lot of things, and it's really a fascinating movie simply because it's so rich in both art and science.
Dr. Thomas J. Goreau, President Coral Reef Alliance and the President of Biorock International, thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
She's had more than a dozen fractures. And in the next few years, she faces 2 major surgeries to strengthen her fragile bones. She's only 10 years old. Most people don't worry about fragile bones until late in life. For those with osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bones are a concern throughout their lifetime. Find out how you can strengthen this child's future.
Diabetes is a killer. After I was diagnosed, I didn't feel sick, so I didn't listen to my doctor. Then it struck. I had a heart attack, then a stroke, and I was only 49.
Most people with diabetes also have high blood pressure and cholesterol, which can cause severe heart damage. In fact, 2 out of 3 people with diabetes die from heart disease or stroke.
Don't let diabetes destroy your life.
Call for your free diabetes survival guide. Choose to live.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we're looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And also, of course, we're looking for the people that are actually creating these new technology, services, and products to address the need of 2 billion new souls on the planet, and at the same time to be able to repair great damage that's being done to the environment and also to address the issues of climate change. And I think actually we're going to have a special treat. We'll have 4 people coming in with us. Marcelian A. Cravat, who goes by Marcy, is here. She is the director and producer of a world-renowned documentary film called Azul. And I think we still have Dr. Thomas J. Goreau, who is the president of the Global Coral Reef Alliance and president of Biorock International. And then sitting right beside me as Skype and I think telephone backup, Henri, is Henri Polgar, who is the executive director of the PanAmerican and PanAfrican Association. So I think I'm saying welcome to Marcy, Tom. Yep. Tom, you're still with us by phone.
I'm still with you, yes, I am.
And Marcy, you're here by Skype. So let's just kick off a little bit. Marcy, just tell us a little bit about what brought you into creating this Azul, the impetus for that, and then I'm going to follow with a question to Tom and right on about why we need this type of filmmaking, Tom. So you'll have the second question, okay?
Okay.
Marcy.
Yes, well, I made the film because my daughter encouraged me to have a look at Jason DeCary Taylor's statues, and I was very, very taken aback by them. I was just really quite blown away by the metaphor of people under the water, by the coral growing on the statues, by the messages contained within each statue. And I decided that it would really make a great subject for a documentary, and that's how I got going with this.
Well, you've done an absolutely fantastic job. And Tom Goreau, who is the world's leading expert as far as coral reefs and the oceans, tell us why do we need to educate the world about coral and the direct impact on the oceans by having coral reefs vibrant and very robust in their size, shape, and impact.
Well, we get enormous ecological benefits from reefs, so we don't pay for it. But in the case of the site where this movie was made, the reefs are what created the whole tourism that built Cancun. For the diving and the beaches are all the result of the reef. The reef protects the sand from washing away and provides the sand grains. And it's disappearing. And what they thought was they thought it was too many tourists on the reef, and if they made statues and distracted the tourists by taking away from the reef would recover. But in fact, the problem was that the reef was downstream from too much sewage, and that was fueling algae overgrowth. And the algae overgrowth overgrew the statues as well. It was a water quality issue. And without addressing the real causes of the problems, unfortunately, they wound up. The project, unfortunately, was very well intentioned. These people meant very well. They meant to show people the wonders of art, but they did it in the wrong place, and and they hadn't realized that at the time until afterwards. So it illustrated the long-term issues about keeping our environment clean if we want to keep these resources going. And I hope people learn that lesson from this film, but it's very easy for people just to put their head in the sand and pretend it isn't happening.
Well, we no pun intended as far as putting their head in the sand, but I want to come up with this first image. And Marcy, I'm going to let you introduce Paul, if you don't mind, if we can get the slide, please.
Well,
and what we want to do is introduce Paul, and where was Azul shot, and why this particular location?
The ecological center that's located in Akamal, Paul's been the director of that for the last 10 years. It attracted us because they were doing a lot of things right. They've implemented a lot of strategies to help the environment, and they protect the bay there that is home to nesting turtles that come annually to lay their eggs. And Paul has been vigilant in protecting this area and seeing too some of the huge problems that are causing the demise of the coral reefs, like wastewater issues that Tom was just talking about, and dealing with the amounts of tourists that go into the water every day and descend upon these turtles. They have all kinds of things going on there too they're basically a model for sustainable tourism, and that's what attracted us to this area.
Tom, and talking about the water quality and the methodologies that understanding 20, 30 years ago were revolutionary and very advanced, and now is actually causing a problem as far as the potable water, the aquifers there, and infusing the waste. But what are some of the other lessons that can be learned from Angel Azul that's really important for people around the globe that will be seeing this world-renowned film that they can take and use in their own lives no matter where they live?
Is Paul on the line, or you?
No, I'm talking to you.
Okay, all right, yes, I wasn't sure if Paul was coming on. Well, I think the fundamental issue there is how easy it is to foul our nest, that the environment we live in is very fragile. In the case of Cancun and those areas, there's very little fresh water. It's floating right beneath their feet in the caves and the limestone rocks. It's only a few feet thick. And if they let the sewage trickle down into it, or they pump too much water out of it, they draw salt water in, they contaminate it. At that point, there's no fresh water available. And so Cancun has faced a situation where they've kind of let sewage foul their reef, but it's also now that to try to reduce that, they're pumping it into the ground, and that's fouling their underwater freshwater supplies as well. So we really need long-term thinking. We need to be able to assess, our needs and have long-term strategies to deal with them, not just taking and not giving back to the ecosystem.
Well, I think that's what the lesson of everything is, and I think this is a lesson that Marcy learned from one of the greatest world explorers, and she's infusing this into her film. But tell us, this is the angel we have up as far as the slide that we just had there for our viewers. Tell us a little bit about the angel and what really led to this, and then of course this went right into the name of the film.
Well, the angel is a symbol of hope. And so many of Jason's statues deal more in with the darker side of human nature. This was one of the few that was meant to provide hope for people. And we latched on to that because we wanted our film to convey that there is still hope if we wake up. And I'm not sure we are waking up, or if we'll wake up quickly enough. But that's what the angel's meant to symbolize. And her wings, by the way, are made of fan coral, Gorgonian fan coral that flows back and forth with the tide.
I tell you, it's just absolutely beautiful, and you did a wonderful job in the Angel Azul film to capture all that. Tom, looking at you can't see this possibly, but we have the young child sitting there looking at the stones and front of them, under the ocean. How do we need to protect the oceans and the coral as we move towards 2050 and the 21st century?
Well, the thing is that coral reefs are not only the most beautiful of marine ecosystems, they're the most fragile, the most vulnerable of all ecosystems, because they're the most, they're the most endangered by rising temperatures and by rising pollution. They need the clearest, cleanest waters in order to survive. And when those waters get too hot or too muddy because we cut down the forest and let the soil wash away, or too polluted because we don't treat our waste properly, the reefs are the first ecosystem that dies. So they're people call them the canary in the mine in that sense, but they're the first ecosystems that are going to go if we don't really change our ways and start nurturing back our life support systems on our planet. We're going to lose other ecosystems too, but coral reefs are the first that'll disappear if we don't act soon.
Marcy, looking at this particular sculpture that we have here, tell us a little bit about that, and what is the metaphor here we're looking at with the contemplation, the garden, and it looks like newly emerging coral?
Well, this is another one of Jason's more hopeful statues. It's called The Gardener. And all of this, these photographs and footage, underwater footage, were shot by Jason himself. And over a period of 5 years while he was living and working down there in Cancun. And this particular statue has the hard, I believe it's called staghorn coral, and actually Tom would probably be a better person to ask, but I believe that's what it is, and it's growing in pots, and the girl is admiring it. It's her garden.
Oh, I tell you, this is just absolutely fantastic. Looking at this, Tom, we're moving through some of these statues. Why do you think it's important to incorporate art with the science? And I'm going to go back to Marcy with that same question in just a minute. But Tom, as a scientist, how do you see this juxtaposition of art and science to educate the public?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, we get a lot of artists who like to work with us because they see enormous visual possibilities of what we do, which is that we grow structures of any size or shape in the sea, and we make things grow like mad all over them and attract fish and other things. So visually, they're very impressive. We dramatically have changed places that had barren. I mean, they're desert-like into areas that are now full of corals and fish. So it's really very impressive what we do. Now, people don't realize that we can bring these ecosystems back, because in every place we're seeing the last of them disappear. And, you know, there are really ways of restoring all the ecosystems that people have developed on land as well as in the sea, and we're just not using what we know, because what we're doing is essentially we're capitalizing off the environment by using up the natural resources, making money off it by running the system down. And if we don't start putting stuff back and nurturing the ecosystem, because these are renewable resources, if we don't nurture it back, we're not going to be able to maintain it, constantly producing at the levels we're going to need in the future. We're just going to be, you know, wiping it out. So reefs, we're doing that with reefs. That's the problem. I mean, we're killing our reefs through pollution and mismanagement almost every place.
Tom, we're gonna lose you, and we're gonna lose Marcy. And I have this one a gentleman sitting here at it looks like a desk at the bottom of the sea, and you have these huge schools of fish. Marcy, what's the image here that we're projecting to the world?
I'm having a hard time seeing that. I think that one is the last correspondent.
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, I think that's the one, and he's supposed to be one of the very last, journalists writing there from his desk and his computer. You know, as to fusing art and science together, I think that
we're going to lose you, Marcy, in about 3 seconds. So,
all right.
Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfripp@aol.com.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read. And may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America, and reading is fundamental.
to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President, Executive Director of Emerald Planet TV, and also the Director and host for the Emerald Planet TV weekly broadcast as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States, looking at 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And I have an outstanding gentleman who's been with us before, and he's back to talk about the coral reefs, the oceans, and climate change. But he's doing it through his own organization, which is called the PanAmerican PanAfrican Association. They are also in consultative status with the United Nations, ECOSOC. And I'm going to let Henri explain that. And this is Henri Georges Polgar. And Henri, welcome back to the Emerald Planet.
Well, thank you. It's really great to be here. Great to be here.
It's always good to have you. Tell us a little bit about the PanAmerican PanAfrican Association. And then what does consultative status mean with the United Nations?
Well, basically the PanAmerican PanAfrican Association has been in existence since the late 60s. And it was an organization that really came out of the era, maybe a lot of folks don't remember, but I do, but of the civil rights movement. And it's evolved into it's an NGO in consultative status with the Economic and Social Council at the United Nations. And basically, we're part of a community of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, where our job is, we're not part of the UN, but we're, like it says in consultative status, where we give advice and we try to persuade the member countries at the UN of our point of view for different causes, one of which is obviously the whole sustainable development movement.
Well, and for full disclosure, I have to admit that we've been working very closely with the PAPA, as it's called, and actually I go back and forth to New York to the United Nations, working with the PAPA, and we've certainly enjoyed our relationship over these years.
Great.
Henri and Dr. Pritchard, who is the founder of the PAPA, and then also Lisa Polgar, who is very talented and is doing fantastic work on behalf of women and all the various issues that are going on there. And then Eric Hagberg, which we will mention him in just a few minutes, as far as the sea cucumber and the coral reef restoration. So you really have a very active organization. So looking at this ECOSOC and the work with the UN, why do you think that's important, Henri?
Well, the reason why we think it's important is because we see the connection. We're not scientists in terms of doing the real work that the scientists do in terms of coral reef restoration, or like Eric Hagberg, where he's been involved in that, and where he's also involved in the sea cucumber fisheries, restoring that. But we're more in the area of disseminating information and trying to act as their advocates. And we see a very distinct connection between environmental justice, cultural development. One of the aspects of the whole sustainable development movement, which was added on in later years, had to do with acknowledging that culture is a very important element in the whole sustainable development movement. That originally it had to do with economic health, social justice, or social equity, and environmental responsibility. And then they added these are not my phrases, but the cultural vitality. And so we, since that's part of our background, we're very much advocates of that. And the UN, we feel that the UN is a great organization to support these efforts.
Yeah, well, it's a neutral zone where people can come and discuss and talk about the issues they have within their own localities, within their nation states, but at the same time look at it as the globe in toto, what's going on there. But also you do very practical projects. This is a photograph of a water project in Uganda, I believe, and so you really are involved in these very much hands-on kinds of activities. Tell us about how you got involved with bringing fresh water to people in Uganda.
Well, this is in the Dominican Republic.
Oh, the Dominican Republic,
It was through an organization called Water Charity, and we gave a grant. It was through one of our parent organizations, which is called the PanAmerican, PanAfrican Association in Japan. And they provided the grant to help build these water tanks. They're ferrous cement water tanks. They hold 11,000 gallons. They provide water for about 110 people, 42 homes, and it was part of an effort where they're trying to build hundreds of these tanks in the Dominican Republic, as well as trying to. I mean, they've more than tried. They've actually built quite a lot. But what I meant try was that they're also attempting to build these in Haiti. So they had the collaboration of the Peace Corps, who helped them. And in fact, the whole idea is originally one that Lisa Polgar, she's my wife, she's the associate director of the PanAmerican PanAfrican Association, but her brother, who was for many, many years an executive with the Peace Corps, this was his idea. It was he who encouraged Water Charity to initiate this effort.
Well, I think this is very important because, again, we have to be the hands and feet of, all things that are really good and the best practices. And this is certainly an example of that. And then going on to what Eric Hagberg has been working on in the South Pacific and Nakuru specifically, we see an outline of the atoll from the satellite imaging. Tell us a little bit about some of his work and why is it important to work with native communities throughout the South Pacific as far as the sea cucumber, which they say really is the best protein for the 21st century.
That's what I understand. It's the best protein, and it has the potential, or it is a huge industry. It's utilized much more in the Pacific countries, in China and countries like that, where it's a very much a part of their diet. It doesn't exist that much here. However, what he's been making an effort is going into different regions in the Pacific Islands to help restore the fisheries of sea cucumbers, because apparently they've been used up quite rapidly, and that's part of his efforts where he's developed some new technologies in terms of creating these hatcheries.
Yeah, and that's really important, and I know that what he's been doing is working with many of the chiefs and these various atolls and islands to create, I guess we call it in the United States and more developed countries, green jobs training, but actually how to go out instead of just harvesting the sea cucumber as there, but actually to really create nurseries for the sea cucumbers.
He has another tangent to his interest, which we admire very much, is that he created a proposal for building a cultural center in Micronesia. And we're still working. It's a work in progress. We've been encouraged to go ahead with it by UNESCO. They want to help support it. There's some it's a local struggle in terms of local problems, but we're still, because the the idea behind the cultural center is that, again, when going back to the whole sustainable development concept, it's that we believe, and many of us believe, that it's for a cultural center that he's conceived as for young people to help repatriate themselves from their own cultural background, which somehow has been interfered
lost over time. And
time.
also too, we want to talk about Henri. What's going on here? This is the Biorock International, Dr. Thomas J. Goreau, and he's been working all around the globe. It's just amazing the number of countries where the technology has been shared. And so literally hundreds of people, through combining the coral reef restoration and also the sea cucumber development, are being employed and allowed to actually have sustainable livelihoods. And I know the Papa is really keen on as far as sustainable livelihoods, but also too with Lisa Polgar, who is the Associate Director with Papa, is very much involved, as well as you, with women's issues around the globes. And this is really looking at not only just the issues that women face, but also allow them to create their own businesses and their own industries so that they have economic independence. Tell us a little bit about that work.
Well, she's very active, and she's spoken at the at the last Worldwide Women's Conference at the UN that took place in May. And she spoke there at an event that we helped organize with a group called Shina. And Shina is a group of women from Tanzania where they've created their own private network where they deal very dramatically with this whole issue about violence against women, and also in terms of helping indigent children that are disabled. And it's it's one of the major successes in the sense of the NGO community at the UN, where over the last 25 years the NGO community has pushed and pushed so that now the UN is really behind promoting this whole movement all over the world of reducing violence against women.
Well, I think that's something that's very important. Also, increasing educational opportunities and healthcare, reduction of malaria. So, I mean, really, all these are interrelated. We keep thinking of education separate from healthcare, separate from jobs creation, but they're all interrelated. Absolutely. So, how do you bring this all together in what you're doing through the Papa? And we only have about 30 seconds left.
Well, I don't really know how to answer that directly because we're always exploring new avenues, but it stems, frankly, we were thinking about this, is that 30 years ago, the founder of our organization...
You're down to 15 seconds.
Oh, okay, well, we'll have to explain it next time.
No, we got to do it right now. 15 seconds.
It's just hope for the best. Hope for the best, I guess, is the only answer that I can think of right now.
Oh, okay. Well, the whole thing is that we have to realize we have to really put all these together and mesh them so that we have education, health care, and sustainable nutrition and all these other things. But I tell you, it's really been fantastic having you back out.
I appreciate it.
With again and talk about the Papa. It's a great organization. You're doing excellent work. And we really appreciate you being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.